The following narrative has been compiled from a Making Peace with Our Past process conducted at a Unity Church in 2001. While this story is factual and based on the reported circumstances of participants, the names and other identifying elements of this story have been modified to protect the anonymity of those involved in the process. No actual individual from the ministry is pictured in this video. Unity Church of Peace began as a study group of 25 truth seekers in the home of Martha and Jacob Reed in 1966. The following year, their lifelong friend and Unity minister, Mrs. Mildred Wiseman, joined the group as their first spiritual leader. Wiseman had entered the ministerial education program following her retirement from nursing in 1965. During her studies at Unity Village, her husband passed away after a long bout with cancer. She gladly returned to her hometown, where her 2 adult children resided, to assume leadership of the budding Unity community in the summer of 1967. During Wiseman's tenure, the Reeds donated a rental property situated at the leading edge of suburbia. Membership into the Association of Unity Churches quickly followed. Over the years, the church gradually converted the property to accommodate their growing congregation of 50 participants. The community enjoyed the love and devotion of Reverend Mildred's presence. Her personal stories of her youth and the occasions of taking classes with the Fillmores inspired her small congregation to a deep appreciation for truth teachings and principles. A strong sense of family existed in spite of the fact that few families with children attended. Wiseman became ill in her 10th year at the church. Her illness became progressively worse, forcing her to announce her retirement. On May 14, 1978, Reverend Mildred Wiseman died in her home. It was rumored that she took her own life with an overdose of sleeping pills. The shock of Wiseman's passing and subsequent grief provided an opportunity for established members to assume leadership roles in the church. Since the congregation's size had fallen back to 50 participants, some were concerned about the church's ability to recover. Calls to the denominational home office quickly provided prayer support and guidance for securing a new minister. Within 4 months, the church welcomed Reverend Michael Rock and his wife Karen to their community. The Rocks were young and energetic. As a family man, Reverend Michael easily shifted attention to the lighter side of church community, drawing families and young adults into the church. A Youth of Unity chapter was formed. The congregation grew quickly, as did the resources to make improvements to classrooms and office facilities, and to hire a director of music and office secretary. Karen welcomed the opportunity to work at the church and share in the inner workings of the ministry with Michael. Her clerical background and degree in bookkeeping made her a logical choice for the secretarial position. While the church seemed to grow in leaps and bounds, reaching a Sunday attendance of 125, Reverend Michael received criticism from the board for not giving established members the pastoral care they needed. And while Reverend Michael seemed busy with counseling and tending to the needs of new members, his wife Karen was blamed for volunteers leaving the church. In the months to follow, several families left the church over conflicts with the minister's wife. Attendance dropped to 90 adult worshipers. The Rocks' relationship also became strained by the board's pressure to move Karen out of the secretarial position. Things grew more complicated when a young woman who was a therapist befriended Reverend Michael, offering him emotional support amidst his struggle to balance tensions between the board and his relationship with Karen. Eventually, rumors brought attention to the Rocks' failing marriage, with the possible links to an affair between the minister and a church member. Upon an announcement of the Rocks' decision to separate, supporters of Reverend Michael and supporters of Karen became entangled in efforts to place blame on each other. The board's discomfort and disdain over the situation led to a request for liaison assistance from Unity headquarters. By this time, Sunday attendance dipped to only 60 people. As a result of the intervention, Reverend Michael resigned and Karen was fired from her position in June of 1980. There was much hurt and distrust between the members of the church, the board, and the home office. The board became defensive as bitter feelings seemed to abound. The lingering distrust led to a decision to delay the ministerial search process indefinitely. Ailing from the emotional upheaval and divisiveness surrounding the Rock's departure, the community delayed engaging in the ministerial search process. During this 18-month transition period, the community restored harmony and gradually grew in membership. Within a year, Sunday attendance rose to 90 participants. A $100,000 bequest made the purchase of an adjoining parcel possible, renewing hopes for a new sanctuary and fellowship hall. A choir became the center of community warmth, and a retreat to Unity Village by the board and lay leaders created a heightened sense of purpose. However, during this period, the youth director moved away and youth attendance declined. The church experienced difficulty in maintaining volunteerism. An investment account was established as a seed fund for their facility prospects. Acting upon the advice of the board treasurer, who had a friend in an investment firm, the church purchased stock in a risky business prospect, hoping to double their investment in 5 years. Unfortunately, the stock plummeted. This resulted in embarrassment and hard feelings between the board and the congregation. A town hall meeting was called to air grievances. The treasurer and the board president resigned as a result of the ensuing drama. This led to a movement within the church to move forward with hiring a new minister. People were concerned that the church had lost its spiritual center. Members demanded that the board select a search committee from the congregation instead of making the decision on their own. A search committee was established in the fall of 1981. Soon after, the church hired Reverends Bob and Ellen Day, a seasoned ministerial team. Their 5-year tenure saw a dramatic increase in membership, activities, and community involvement. Within 2 years, church attendance tripled, creating the need for 2 worship services. The Days were well liked and enjoyed the enthusiastic support of the entire congregation. For the first time in the church's history, continuing education program classes were offered, and a lay ministry training program was initiated. Among their many accomplishments was the construction of a new church facility on the adjoining property and the hiring of a youth director. The church received an endowment providing the organization with a perpetual monthly income based upon the bank interest rates. Tragically, however, Reverend Bob died of a heart attack at his office while working late. The ensuing trauma not only devastated the community, but also contributed to Reverend Ellen's failing health and acute depression. To the disappointment and shock of her spiritual family, she suddenly resigned and refused any contact with the community. In the aftermath, the board was blamed for working the ministers too hard and not offering them the support that they deserved. The upset contributed to lagging attendance and decreased financial support. As attendance dropped to 175, the board decided to return to 1 Sunday service. In an effort to quell the upset, heartbreak, and loss suffered by the community, the board quickly acted to hire Reverend Richard Drake, a charismatic truth teacher and outspoken proponent of love in action. He easily shifted attention to building small group ministries and hired an energetic volunteer coordinator who was the Day's protege and a licensed Unity teacher. The Sunday attendance stabilized at around 215. Within the second year of Drake's tenure, the choir director resigned due to personal conflicts with the minister. Rumors circulated regarding a failed relationship between the two. Havoc was once again visited upon the community when the minister was accused of inappropriate conduct with at least 2 church members. The church became bitterly divided over the issue. Some believed that the minister's personal life was nobody's business. Others were appalled at Drake's conduct. Troubled by the scandal, the board conspired to fire Drake. News of the board's intention leaked to the supporters of the minister, who petitioned for a special membership meeting. At the congregational meeting, accusations, insults, and bitter feelings polarized the community. The board was recalled by a 52% majority. Left with the spoils of a broken church and a dwindling financial support, Reverend Drake resigned within 3 months. And the aftermath resulted in a church split. Drake and his supporters established a church in a nearby neighborhood. Drake's request to establish a new ministry was denied. The board of Unity Church of Peace demanded that the Association of Unity Churches act to remove Drake from the ministry. Unsatisfied with their response, the ailing ministry blamed the association and Unity School for licensing such an unethical opportunist as Drake. The congregation dwindled to 100 in the months that followed. Blame, distrust, and hurt swallowed the community. An interim minister was suggested as healing and prayer circles within the community slowly emerged among the faithful. With Drake out of the picture, superficial attempts to pull the congregation back together resulted in the hiring of Candace Brown, an interim minister, in the fall of 1987, who agreed to assist the church in its healing and recovery for the next year. Much progress was made to bring cohesiveness and order back to the church community. The board received training, and the church hired a facilitator to lead the congregation in efforts to draft a mission, vision, and strategic plan. Problems persisted, however, as the youth ministry declined and revenues dipped to a ground-shaking low. With falling interest rates deflating the endowment, this once reliable source of continued support only chipped away at their growing indebtedness. As a result, the interim minister departed after only serving 6 months. The official word was that she had an ailing family member needing her immediate attention. Privately, members speculated that the church couldn't afford her salary. In the depths of their collective despair, the community mustered the courage to engage the ministerial search process. Their prayers were answered with the hiring of Reverend Rhonda Hanson, a middle-aged woman who was attracted to the assignment in part to be close to her adopted son and family. Reverend Rhonda's capacity to bring warmth and spirituality to the troubled community helped to create healing and renewal throughout the community. While not without challenges and interpersonal difficulties, Reverend Rhonda was successful in leading the church into a new era. When her relationship with the board became strained, she knew that their concerns and criticisms were rooted in the church's troubled past. She wisely requested conflict transformation assistance from the Association of Unity Churches. The subsequent process resulted in the resignation of 3 board members, but also brought the entire congregation into greater ownership of the church's future. The youth ministry grew and the choir regrouped. Small group ministries were established. Sunday attendance increased to 150. 2 ministerial candidates were enrolled from the church. A licensed Unity teacher headed a program of enthusiastic volunteers. The church became busy with activities and social events. Over the years, the church community grew into a stable pastoral church. In her 11th year, when all had but forgotten the difficulties of the past, tragedy once again struck. Reverend Rhonda suffered a heart attack while driving to church to meet with the board. She died on May 5, 1998, after 3 weeks in intensive care. The grief-stricken community band together to support one another and to move forward. Within 9 months, Reverend Ian Cole was hired. Reverend Ian brought a spirit of joy and laughter to the downtrodden community. He initiated the practice of rituals by adding a monthly communion service and a monthly burning bowl ceremony. He conducted midweek Sufi dance sessions. In spite of his well-intended efforts to turn the tide of grief and mourning, Reverend Ian proved to be a transition minister and was asked to resign after 18 months of service. Presently, Reverend Betty Parker is in her second year at Unity Church of Peace. Reverend Betty's talks and classes are exceptional. She brings a dimension of professionalism to the pulpit, often quoting prose from memory. She's an outstanding storyteller and writer. No one faults her ability to capture the attention of her audience. Her background in drama and theater inspired her to initiate a community theater project at the church. While she's perceived by many to be doing a good job, the board has been critical of her since the beginning. Some of the elders in the church believe that the worship service is too much like a performance. While some of the established members have left the church, attendance has gradually picked up from 100 to 125 on a Sunday. Yet the board still believes that she's not working hard enough to grow the church, that she delegates too many of her pastoral duties to lay ministers, and that she's a poor administrator. Her contract is up for renewal. The board has discussed letting her go, but is willing to allow a making peace with our past process occur prior to making a decision about Reverend Betty's contract. Some, in their brief association with the ministry, are angry and confused by the board's criticisms of Reverend Betty. Attempts to get information from the board have only created more distrust and suspicion. Many are certain that they have a hidden agenda. A few requested copies of the bylaws and contacted the Association of Unity Churches to find out what rights members have. Meanwhile, people are starting to notice the irony. Unity Church of Peace has experienced little peace in its rich history. Perhaps their experience will reveal an alternative possibility that could lead to a whole new level of church.
What you've experienced as a case study was called a Making Peace with the Past process. This was a process that I created after I participated in the Mennonite Mediation Skills Institute training when I was a regional representative of the South Central Unity Churches Association. I'm wanting to present this material in a slightly different context, not in the context of healing and reconciliation, but in the context of transitioning from minister-centric to mission-centric ministry. And so when we explore the nuances of the story that you heard in the case study, I'm wanting to begin to share information about the insights that are possible when we look at a ministry's experience over time. And in the course of the process itself, facilitating a genogram activity, one of the important messages that is conveyed to the participants is that there are three aims to the genogram activity. And the first aim is that we're here to identify the unconscious patterns that perpetuate a legacy of unresolved issues. So whatever is going on that's a part of the ministry's pain body, we're here to identify that. We're here to get in touch with what that energy is. The second aim is to see those patterns as the unintended consequence of the way in which we do ministry. And then finally, the third aim is to create the church's shadow card and to be able to have a sense of the underlying issues and what they represent. And in effect, the genogram activity is putting the ministry through a Q process. And so rather than this being an intervention, which it was in the context of the case study, I will present aspects of that case study in the context of the intervention that this ministry received. But I'm mostly going to be pointing my comments towards the ultimate aim of understanding why we look at the case study is to see that all of our interventions, everything that this ministry engaged with respect to the services and programs that the parent organization could provide, was insufficient to alter the established patterns of that ministry. Even though there was a healing and reconciliation process, the timeline of that ministry continued to have its roller coaster appearance. So the next aspect of this conversation is to describe what happened in that Making Peace with the Past process, which is a process that I facilitated. And so before I begin to be in that conversation, I want to give you an example of of what the process looks like with respect to taking in and down the data. And so typically it's done on flip charts, and as you can see by this example, this is not the example from the case study. This is an example from the genogram activity that I did at Unity Spiritual Center in Spokane. And I'll talk a little bit more about our process at our ministry with them. But suffice to say that what got produced based upon the information that you saw in the slides that I presented, the documentation, the prouds, the sorries, etc., is represented by this master document where all of that information, all that data is archived, is saved, and then it can be studied. And so in part that's what I'm wanting us to do, is to actually look and study at what's going on in our New Thought movement over time, because no one has ever done this before, and it's important that we take a look and see what's happening, as this is just one example, but yet we can sense that it is likely very universal. So what I've done now in this next graph is to map out that the entire 36-year history of that case study over time, identifying in the graph the attendance fluctuations as well as the specific eras associated with each of those spiritual leaders or lack thereof, as well as color-coded these particular eras in the context of blue being uplifting and red being traumatic and difficult, and green being a kind of kind of neutral piece there. So as you can look at this, you can see that there were 4 uplifting eras and 3 very traumatic eras, and a couple of just speed bumps, so to speak. And it just gives you a felt sense of what's happening. And if we would extend this timeline into the future, it would still look like this. You would still have times when it was great and things were awesome, and it'd have times of difficulty and challenge. And so it's our never-ending story. And it's important that we understand that until we really look and study at what we're creating, we are creating this dynamic. It's not something that's happening to us. It's something that's created out of how we be doing our ministry. And so now what I'm wanting to share are the insights that this community, the participants in that particular Making Peace of the Past process, as they looked at their entire history, their entire story, I asked the question, what do you notice? What is your story trying to tell you about what needs to shift in order for you to be free from your past? And so here's what they noticed. They noticed that 2 ministers died on the job. It seems like that in their culture, that dying is a part of their job description. In other words, it's part of the job description to die on the job if you're going to be a minister here, is what they said. And this was an apt observation because it led them to understand what they were doing in the context of the board being worried about money and worried about stuff, wanting the ministers to work harder. And so they could see, wow, we have helped contribute to the very hurts that we're experiencing right now. And that was an aha that was really powerful for them. The next thing that they noticed is that there were patterns of distrust throughout the ministry. There was distrust between the congregation and the board, between the board and the minister, and the minister and the board and Unity Worldwide and Unity School. There was distrust everywhere, and they saw that. They saw that there was very little partnership in the entire organization. So they also noticed that their congregational identity was so embedded in who the minister was that it was almost as if the minister was the parent. And so that was a great insight for them to have. And when they said parent, they said for better or for worse. So in other words, sometimes it felt pretty good to be taken care of, but other times it felt really, really awful when the parent was not functioning. And then there was also a sense that they did not know themselves independent of who the minister was. They also noticed that the board's role had evolved similar to what happens in family systems when children must take care of their parents, either because of illness or addiction or abandonment. 2 ministers died, 2 ministers in ministerial misconduct. And so what's a board to do but to become a protector, a defender of the ministry, and if necessary, an adversary to the minister? So there's a lot of things that we could say about what's gone on in these 36 years that could have contributed or even exacerbated what has happened in this ministry's journey. I want to make one thing very, very clear at this point. No ministry leader, no congregant, no board member signs up to participate in drama or betrayal or disappointment. And so we need to understand and have great compassion for the unfortunate consequences of what has happened because of this particular paradigm of ministry. Our ministry practice, the way in which our institution conducts itself, has created emotional and spiritual baggage with respect to the way in which we do ministry. And so, as we've seen in this storytelling process, when we look at, over time, the experience of ministry and the comings and goings of their spiritual leader, it is not without impact. Within our movement, and within our New Thought movement, this legacy of each era inheriting the unintended consequences or unresolved issues of the previous era is the way it works. It's the reason why this particular ministry practice is unsustainable. And so what if we were to tell our ministry story not in the context of who the minister is and what our accomplishments and prouds and sorrows and unresolved issues are all about in that relationship, but what would happen if we were to tell the story in the context of our efforts to fulfill our mission? What if that becomes the context around which we identify our prouds and our sorrows and our issues, and begin to look at each era in the context of what our purpose was and our efforts to fulfill it?